Hello, so this is a presentation on groups in tabletop interactive surfaces. How does location data influence design decisions in public engagement? This study is the results of my research grant, which was an NSERC Engage grant, which was held between the University of Calgary and an independent organization called VizworX. The objective of that study was to conduct research that will help the design of software to be used on a tabletop interactive surface in public engagement. The length of the study was from June 2016 to May 2017, and it included 2 studies. The first study of which was completed in September 2016, and the second study investigates how does location data influence design decisions in public engagement. For this study, we had 3 pilot studies, which included 4 participants. Then the second study was 11 participants, and the third had 6. So the final study for this one had 48 participants, and the first study had 13, which in total we worked with 82 participants to learn how people use location data to answer design questions. So for context, we're concerned with public engagement. In public engagement, more and more non-experts are being asked to contribute their ideas. Public engagement can take many different formats, such as focus groups, town hall meetings, or online surveys. And they can be difficult. They're seen sometimes as required, but not necessarily helpful for design. So the question is, data, can it help? So there's a lot more data than there's ever been before because of GPS devices, tracking devices, and cell phones. A lot of information now we can have that we didn't know before. Using data supports evidence-based decisions. So what's the problem? We are seeing an increasing use of public engagement to analyze data, but this is actually cognitively challenging. It requires incorporating data into personal perspectives and providing a meaningful response, which it has been concluded is not easy. So can tools help? So we're looking at tabletop interactive surfaces, which appear to be useful for public engagement. Basically, more than one person can use them, they're interactive, they support collaboration, but they are rarely used. Secondly, we are interested in groups. So there is a current trend to use online surveys because it is easier and cheaper. But the question is there a benefit to having people come together in public engagement? So our question is, does use of tabletop interactive surface, that's TTIS, with groups increase data influence in decisions? So we simulated a public engagement, and we compared tabletop interactive surfaces with paper posters and groups versus individuals. So for this study, we assume that being influenced by data is good. If people are influenced by data, it helps us justify decisions back to the public. We know decisions are based on evidence, not personal bias, and it's presumably easier to build consensus and concentrated discussion. So our research question is there influence of data when informed stakeholders make design decisions? And does influence increase if the data is presented on a tabletop interactive surface versus paper? And does influence increase if the people are in groups versus individuals? So to figure this out, we created a study model where we ask a question. We then show some data, and we then ask the same question again, and we measure the difference. We also timed group discussions of when people were using the data. We timed how long people explored the data, and we also asked participants questions after the study. So in total, we had 48 participants, and as you can see with each treatment, we had 8 participants. So the data we were using to show the participants is collected from volunteered cell phones. So as you know, your location data is stored in your phone at all times, and we were able to access this data. So we had 30 students volunteer their data for this study, but we actually now have over 300 students who have volunteered their data, and we are continuing to work with that for future studies. So this is showing the University of Calgary map. It's not essential to understand this, but just so you get some bearings, there's the train and the main bus loop. The campus is sort of divided into 3 main areas of sciences, humanities, and kinesiology. The darker purple on our maps shows where more people were walking outdoors at 5 p.m. And so we showed our participants multiple maps at different times. So these are showing where people walked at different times of the day. Also, we showed where people were staying in one place or resting at different times of the day. And we also showed where there's a diversity of users using different locations on campus. So then we asked, after showing them all of this information, where should we put an outdoor student hub? Okay, so for our results, we found that groups use data more predictably in design decisions. So this is shown by the fact that the groups changed location selection, the change in location selection was affected by whether or not they were in a group. Groups reported being more influenced by the data, and groups had more insights after exploring the data. Also, tabletop interactive surfaces with groups, the groups with tabletop interactive surface discussed the data while exploring it, whereas groups using paper posters did not. Also, tabletop interactive surfaces, we did not notice a difference or measure a difference in selection of location based on that treatment. But people using the tabletop interactive surface explored data longer, and they spent a longer time with the data. We also measured that a longer time spent with data resulted in a higher reported influence. And also, individuals using the tabletop interactive surface had fewer insights than other treatments. So we will now discuss this. So first of all, I just want to go over the building of our evidence. So what we're looking for is a change in difference, a statistical difference from before to after they had viewed the data. When we see a statistical difference, it infers that we can predict future behavior, but it requires enough data from before and after. So just because there's a change or a large amount of change doesn't always make a statistical difference. So we may not always find information or find a lot, but what we do find, it actually means something. It's actually pretty hard for us to observe a statistical difference. We have to have quite a lot of data. Okay, so overall, our findings were that people did change their decisions after viewing data, and the blue star locations on this map shows where there was a statistical difference in their selections from before to after. But within the treatments of individual tabletop interactive surface and paper, we did not observe a recognizable pattern of people changing their location. But in groups, there was a difference. So groups predictably changed their decision from the location P to the location Q after viewing the data. Groups was the only treatment where we saw a predictable pattern in how people selected locations. So as well, groups had more insights after exploring the data. So after we let them look at the data, we asked them what they thought or what they had learned. And groups always had more responses. We also asked them afterwards how influenced they felt by the maps over their personal experience. And with groups, they reported the maps to have more influence. And with the other treatments, there was no difference. So overall, groups more predictably use data to make decisions. Now, why might this be? We present that it's because the data acts as a tiebreaker or a neutral third party. So people will defer to the data when having to choose between two sides. So one guy will say, I think we should choose K. And the other person says, I think we should pick E. And then, they respond by saying the maps say there are more people near N, so maybe we should go with that. And they agree. So they're using the map themselves to come to an agreement. We actually saw this quite often in our study. So this means that face-to-face group meetings or focus groups will lead to more data-focused decisions than engagement methods involving individuals, such as online questionnaires. Okay, so in addition, we saw that groups using the tabletop interactive surface talked about the data while exploring, whereas groups using paper did not at all. So you can see from this graph, they did not talk at all. They were silent, whereas the other groups talked quite a bit about the data from a range of amount of time. So why is this? So people won't talk voluntarily while exploring data if they don't have to. People are shy and slightly awkward and uncomfortable. but having to break the ice by interacting with the system opened the space to discuss the data. So one person might say, so how about you open the layers and I'll zoom the image? And by having this brief little interaction, it actually meant that they ended up talking. In town hall meetings, the public often explores data on posters, as this picture shows. But it's possible to avoid talking with other participants when you have posters, so people just generally will remain silent. So in interactive media, such as a tabletop interactive surface, will get people talking about the data when exploring it, whereas paper posters will not. This is good for public meetings where discussion and collaboration is important. So people also spent more time exploring the data using a tabletop interactive surface than paper. And this was true what we saw whether they were in groups or even as individuals. So basically, we saw that tabletop interactive surface led to longer exploration time. We also analyzed whether how long they spent with the data affected how much they said they were influenced by the data. So amount of time, does this affect influence? We found that the amount of time did affect their self-reported influence rating. So basically, the more time they spent basically resulted in them having a higher influence rating, so they felt more influenced the longer time they spent using the data. As you can see, more time exploring the data resulted in higher self-reported influence rating. But we did not find that the tabletop interactive surface affected reported map influence, but if we combine these two separate pieces of evidence together, it implies that using something like a tabletop interactive surface will result in a higher influence. So use of data presentation formats like the tabletop interactive surface encourage longer data exploration times and will likely lead to greater influence of the data. So in something like a town hall meeting, interactive media can increase the amount of time people spend with the data, which may increase the influence that participants feel that the data has. So another finding was that individuals using the tabletop interactive surface had fewer insights than everyone else. Now, why is this? We concluded that it's because they recalled insights from memory. So because they could only see one map at a time, and they had to open and close layers. So when we asked them the question, they basically just spoke from memory. Whereas the people with paper could see that all the maps at once and view them while providing feedback. So they could continue to look at them and think about them and talk about them and compare them while they were speaking. And the results ended up us having many more insights from people using posters. So if people at a town hall meeting can view all the data simultaneously while recording their insights, they will provide more feedback. So overall, a recap of our results, groups predictably use data to make design decisions. The tabletop interactive surface supports discussion during data exploration, whereas paper does not. Our findings were inconclusive whether the use of a tabletop interactive surface results in predictable patterns in design decisions, but we did find that people using the tabletop interactive surface explored the data longer, and we found evidence that longer exploration times led to higher reported influence. If we combine these two pieces of evidence, it implies that devices like the tabletop interactive surface can increase influence of data in design decisions. When participants are able to view all the data simultaneously, we recorded more insights. So our final recommendations from this study are to use face-to-face groups to increase the influence of data in design decisions, to support discussion among groups with tabletop interactive surfaces instead of paper posters, to use tabletop interactive surfaces to increase data exploration time, because increased data exploration time results in increased influence of data. Also to include a presentation format option that allows an overall view of data to increase feedback. So to be continued, my study also looked at where do students think we should put an outdoor student hub and why, and how do people use data to make design decisions, and how does this help public engagement. But that is for another report, and I'm not going to present that in this presentation here. So thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate your comments and feedback.